And you're on the leader in pure classic country, 98.7 and AM 1580 WLIJ. And we're getting ready for the Iowa Corn 350 powered by ethanol at the Iowa Speedway this Sunday evening at 5 here on WLIJ with coverage from the Motor Racing Network. And now, there's no shortage of talent at the Motor Racing Network. We're here with one of them, the Postman. And you know him very well here from Pit Road. It is Mr. Steve Post from Halstead, Pennsylvania. Steve, good morning.
Good morning. Great to catch up with you. And such an exciting time in NASCAR with a new venue, man. Pretty exciting going to Iowa this week for sure.
It sure is, and they've said it before since 2006, if you build it, they will come. It's a sold-out event there in Newton, Iowa. We're going to get to that here in just a moment, but first I want to talk about you. Some of the best hair, in my opinion, in the garage any given weekend. You've been working on that mane for a while, and it doesn't go unnoticed, but I wanted to ask you, like I have some of the other talent, we've got the Bagman, the Godfather. There's a story behind all of these, is what I've discovered, and I wanted to know since my childhood, why do they call you the Postman?
Well, the last name is Post, so that's the first part about it, and then and it's just kind of evolved. And you know, the bottom line of it is with it is there's so many things we've all been called that are less flattering than the Postman. And so consequently, I decided, you know, they could be calling me a whole lot worse. And so that's kind of where it came from. And I think part of it's, I've been, you know, even back in high school, folks would sometimes reference me as that. So it's a pre-MRN thing, but then when you're working alongside of the Bagman, you know, I mean, Postman kind of fits in well. And so it's kind of taken off, and I've actually now embraced it. I even have a blog called Postman 68, and it's like if you're gonna be granted it, then take it and run with it, and that's where we're at. But primarily is there's so many other things I've been called that are far worse. I'm just embracing it.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the 68 part of your blog and everything like that, coming back from your days at 5 Mile Point Speedway and all the other places there in Pennsylvania. I understand you also did some PR work before you joined MRN in 2003 with Kenny Wallace, of all people, at the Herman. That could make a whole show on its own, I'm sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. My very first PR gig, I moved to North Carolina in the mid-'90s, and my first PR gig was Kenny Wallace, the Square D company, when he made one of his forays into the Cup Series. And traveling with Kenny Wallace was fun. We had lots of laughs. I will say this, the Kenny we see on YouTube, the Kenny we see on Fox Sports, the Kenny we see wherever he's at is the Kenny that you see all the time. He is authentic as they come. He's just wide open. So, I spent a couple years with Kenny Wallace. I worked with a small truck team, IWX Motor Freight. We had Randy Tolsma and Tony Roper, a driver that he wasn't driving our truck, but lost in a crash in the late 1990s. And then the other one that I had, who's been in the news a lot here lately, is Ricky Rudd with Texaco Haviland. And so very, very happy that Ricky Rudd will be a 2025 inductee into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. So did the PR stuff a little bit. Kenny Wallace and Ricky Rudd were the two primary drivers that I worked with, and really enjoyed that. And that allowed me to make the connections and get the audition to step into the MRN role.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of Herman, from Kenny Wallace to Rusty, he's kind of the reason we're getting to Iowa. If it wasn't for his handiwork from the beginning in 06, now coming to a partial repave there at the Iowa Speedway in the corners. Given the track record we've had so far with North Wilkesboro, and then, just Sonoma last weekend with their repave, it put on a fantastic show. What are you thinking with a partial repave in the entrance and exit of the corners, how that's going to fare for the Cup guys this Sunday?
I am fascinated by this and curious about this. And I've talked to a couple crew chiefs, and they are fascinated by it and curious about it too. Because this is one where I'll say this, and I was actually talking to some of the folks, Greg Walter, who runs Charlotte Motor Speedway, and we were talking Tuesday night at the summer shootout, and I said, man, you guys, repaves, North Wilkesboro, Sonoma, you guys have knocked it out of the ballpark. You really have figured it out. And he said, it's such a science with the aggregate and everything, and getting it right and getting it just so we don't have that 2 or 3 or 4 year window where the racing is just brutal, not good because the asphalt is so good, and so they've done a nice job with it. This is fascinating to me because you're going to have old, worn out, and particularly in looking at it, and I could be totally wrong here, and we have an hour practice on Friday afternoon where we'll learn a lot, but this getting into turn number 1 is going to be tricky because the braking points and getting down into the corner is on the old, worn out asphalt, and then once you get it wound down, you jump onto the new asphalt, which you're assuming and should be higher grip. And so I think this is fascinating. I really think it's going to be interesting to see what we have. We've had full repaves, but I don't know. And then we've had strips of pavement. We had strips of asphalt at Pocono. We've had strips of asphalt at Darlington that really, really became aggressive traction zones, and they've worn out over time. It's going to be interesting to see what this is like at Iowa. And I know that there are a lot of crew chiefs looking at that hour of practice that they get before the race that they're going to really be looking at that and seeing what the track does and what the car handles on the old track and the new track.
Yeah, that limited amount of practice is going to be super crucial, and I've been kind of skeptical. I've really enjoyed the bumps and characteristics of Iowa, but cautiously optimistic about this repave, a partial repave, and the 7th, 8th mile. There's nothing much like it in the country, and also the multi-banking still intact. We'll see how they continue to use that. Steve, it seems like ever since it was announced, Iowa's just getting its first Cup date when it was announced last year. It's just been so highly anticipated, in that, especially for that market of NASCAR fans in the Midwest. How big is that for those that live out there that, stick and ball sports, they're not too much in their area, but when it comes to NASCAR, they have shown in the past that they'll come in full force.
Yeah, and it's such an exciting part to Iowa. I've got a pretty good track record out in Iowa, and that I also do a sprint car show, and 30 minutes away is Knoxville, Iowa, home of the Knoxville Nationals, the largest sprint car race. And the one thing that I noticed the first time I went out to Knoxville for that is you're walking around and you're at a dirt track race, and people are coming up and want to talk NASCAR. And it's like there are some in our world of motorsports that like to draw lines between dirt tracks and sprint cars and late models and asphalt and Cup and NASCAR. But when I arrived out there in Knoxville, they're just race fans. They love their sprint cars at Knoxville, but they love their NASCAR racing. They've shown at Iowa Speedway they love their IndyCar racing. And so that is a car racing area that is unheralded, if you will, and yet it's one of those sleeping giants as far as motorsports goes. There's more dirt tracks out there and racetracks out there than most states have, and so consequently, I don't think I'm surprised at all with the energy level out there, the excitement level of it that NASCAR's coming to town because there's just so many race fans out there, and again they've shown it with IndyCar. They've packed that place for IndyCar races, and so this I think is just another really, really good step in Iowa motorsports, and it's going to be fun to be out there. It really, truly is. The World of Outlaw sprint cars are going to be down the road 30 miles at Knoxville, and so the irony of this thing is, or the timing of this thing is, the main road between Newton and Knoxville has road construction, and it is going to drive everybody's GPS crazy running back and forth. But
wonderful.
The point, it is. It's just perfectly timed. It's like who didn't see this on the radar? I've already looked at a run around as far as that goes also, but the bottom line of it is that Iowa is a rich state in motorsports, and this is just another chance for the fans out in that area and the Midwest in general to prove it as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, guys like Kyle Larson, they have really blurred that line between motorsports fans, and I think it's been closer than it has maybe than it's ever been. Just IndyCar. There's not like the IndyCar camp, NASCAR camp, sprint car camp. They're all race fans, especially there in the Midwest. I want to focus on Rusty Wallace again. He had a big hand in planning how this looked and everything. Being a 1989 Cup Series champion and now one of the lead analysts for MRN, how big of a full circle moment? Have you heard anything from Rusty going into this weekend, being on the call there at the track that basically is his baby?
Yeah, and it is going to be fun for Rusty, and have not talked to him in advance of the race. But I know just in talking, I actually a week or so ago talked to Kenny, and Rusty's all geeked up about this, and he was excited because we had Rusty with us at the Worldwide Technology over in St. Louis, over in Gateway. So he's at a really good part of his season because he had a home race for St. Louis for where he grew up, and then he did reference it a few times in the broadcast how excited he is to get to Iowa. So consequently, I think it's really, really exciting. It's going to be so much fun to get his perspective on it because that's the one thing I've learned in broadcasting races: perspective from pit road, perspective from Mike Bagley in the turns, perspective from the booth. But you got crew chief perspective, you got driver perspective. Well, you've got Hall of Fame Trek designer perspective, and it's going to be really, really neat as we work through the weekend with Rusty joining us, and he's part of all the festivities out there. Rusty Wallace will be kissing babies and shaking every hand at Iowa before we settle into the broadcast, and it's going to be a fun weekend. But I think you're right on that. I think it's got to be for him. It's got to be a really, really neat full circle moment for him to see this thing that he was so integral in designing back in the day, finally getting its chance at NASCAR racing and NASCAR Cup Series racing, and to see what it looks like on Sunday evening.
Yeah, I think NASCAR fans around here in Middle Tennessee can really relate to that because I mean, Nashville Super Speedway is just under an hour here from Shelbyville, and how many years did we have to wait for that facility to finally get what it was intended to do? So we feel a lot there for those in Newton, Iowa, and also for Rusty Wallace to see a project like that not fall off the radar completely, but now get its full circle moment. Looking at the Iowa Cup race again, Joey Logano, one of those drivers I'm seeing, he wins those inaugural events. He's been known to do that at the first LA Clash and the Bristol Dirt and everything like that. Well, he really does need a win this year. What do you think for Iowa?
Well, here's the thing. I think and I agree with you, Joey. I mean, he's the guy we target. I mean, he went up to North Wilkesboro on the new asphalt and won the All-Star race. So we target Joey with that, but we're in a weird spot this year because, I don't think there'd be any shock if Joey Logano wins this race. I mean, he's Team Penske, he's Joey Logano, he's a champion, so I don't think there's any shock. But we're in a really interesting spot this year in that there are just a couple of really, really good teams just knocking it out. Kyle Larson, you mentioned him just referencing the short track stuff. Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin's won 2 of the short track races. He won Bristol and Richmond. I think Denny Hamlin's going to be good. Christopher Bell has been on fire here as of late, and watching him. So, do you have the recent performance versus the Joey and Paul Wolf, or that whole team there over there at Penske Racing? Do you have their adaptability, or do you have just the performance? And stay tuned. I think that's going to be part of the fun as we work through this to see what happens, how Joey performs. But how Ryan Blaney, the last time we were on an oval track at Worldwide Technology, Team Penske, Ryan Blaney was good. So no shocker if Joey wins, but there's some other guys that are Joey's gonna have to work for it as they would have to do every week to get the win, and we'll see what happens with it at Iowa. That's the fun part about this is I've literally been all week long. I've been reading columns and listening to podcasts, and nobody has a clue. And I think that is a really, really good way to go into a race.
Yeah, I think you and Todd Gordon on MRN Crew Call just talked to Ricky Stonehouse Jr.'s crew chief Mike Kelly about this very thing and the kind of dominance they've had at Iowa in the past. And I mean, you talked about Christopher Bell. I mean, Chase Briscoe, Brad Keselowski, Noah Gregson, Austin Cindric. They've all been there before in various ways. Iowa is in a special part of the calendar. It is marking 10 races left until the playoffs begin at Atlanta. And of course, we've got the 2-week Olympic break to let drama build between there too in July. Who else are you seeing, Postman, that might be in the Kenny Loggins danger zone, if you will? I mean, not just too far off the cut line, but or maybe in severe danger. Who are those that you're kind of eyeing?
Well, I think in you referenced them there. Joey Logano to me is one that they even said. I talked to Joey at, where was it at? It was at St. Louis. I talked to Joey there, and he said, our strength right now is these short tracks, okay? So we need to be good here at St. Louis. We need to be good at Iowa. We need to be good at New Hampshire. So their clock is ticking. They need to, their strength right now is the tracks we're in right now, and they need to make sure they step it up. We've got drivers that are on the bubble as far as the point standings go. You know, Bubba Wallace is just in. Kyle Busch is just out. And where this gets interesting is, you know, we've had a couple guys that are outside of the bubble that could get wins. We've had Austin Cindric and Daniel Suarez get wins. So does that move the bubble, and does that put Bubba Wallace out? And next up is Chris Buescher. You know, Chris has been so close to winning. Remember at Darlington when him and Tyler Reddick got into it, and his point was, you've got a sticker. It wasn't about the sticker. It was about the win. Well, Chris Buescher doesn't have a win. And, you know, we get two new winners, which we could do. Joey Logano could be one of them. Michael McDowell could be one of them. Chase Briscoe could be one of them. We get two new winners, and that sticker that Chris Buescher is talking about at Darlington, he's out. It doesn't matter. And so to me, you're back there, Buescher. Blaney's got a little bit of a margin. Bowman's got a little bit of a margin. But I am telling you, these guys need to get a win. There is just, you got to get a win here. You just if you're late in the day at Iowa, late in the night Sunday night at Iowa, or late in the day next week in New Hampshire or Nashville or the street race in Chicago, you need to take some chances to get a win, because this thing is topsy-turvy. There's a race later on in the year, this regular season, called Daytona, where any one of those guys outside of that bubble could take a win. You want to get a win, and I think there's a lot of guys. I think mathematically there's a few guys in the danger zone. I think there's a lot of drivers right now really uncomfortable and would love to get a win, and they'd love to do it this weekend in Iowa.
Absolutely. It's coming up sooner than you think. Now is the time to pounce if you're there on the cut line. It's the Iowa Corn 350 powered by ethanol at the Iowa Speedway this Sunday evening at 5 p.m. here on WLIJ with coverage from the Motor Racing Network. Postman, once again, it was a privilege to speak with you today. One of my many childhood heroes, if you don't mind me saying, and just a privilege to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, great to catch up with you. Love all of our listeners over there in Tennessee. Love the state of Tennessee. I'm a classic country fan, so station, music, NASCAR, we got it all there. We appreciate everyone tuning in and listening to all of our coverage here on the station, and great to catch up with you. Great to spend some time here today.
The Iowa Corn 350 powered by ethanol at Iowa Speedway, Sunday evening at 5 p.m. on WLIJ. Listen anywhere you go on the WLIJ 98.7 app or on WLIJradio.com.